Hello, everyone, and welcome to Off the Wall. I got Josh with me
Woo!
today, and we're going to be reviewing the first 3 episodes of season 3, Bad Batch. But first off, Josh, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I get to talk Star Wars. It's always a fun time.
How many Grogus do you have in your room
We're
right now?
not gonna talk about it. It's not by choice. I will put it that way.
His family keeps buying him Grogu every birthday, Christmas, Valentine's Day.
I don't know
Just
how many
all the
times I tell them
Grogus.
stop doing it, but when you sit here and you have holiday themed, and I didn't get this, but I guess I'll take it.
But we're not talking about Grogu today. We're talking about the Bad Batch. Thoughts of the first 3 episodes?
I think narratively we got real in depth of where these characters are. It's not really you let these characters really breathe in these 3 episodes just because of where they are at this time in the story. Because most of the time, like season 1, they're kind of establishing. Season 2, they were still kind of together, but it was more of just the collective bouncing off each other, Guardians of the Galaxy type thing. But now, since they're in this situation and they're separated, you get more of the character layers that are that you get to see more. So it's a little bit more slower paced. Obviously, there still is the pew pews and the get down and action that is Star Wars, but you get a little bit more character, especially with Omega and Crosshair. You really get where they are and how kind of defeated they are.
The first and third episode were my favorite. Crosshair is one of the most fascinating characters to me. And in season 1 and season 2, when you had that Crosshair episode, probably the best episode of those 2 seasons. Yeah, it's a little bit slower paced. We get a little bit of time jumps. You're really seeing the desperation with Hunter in the second episode. So it's going to be interesting to go into like the character dynamics of the Bad Batch now that Crosshair is good again. They've lost Tech, which we already know because of
I'm
season
not giving
1
up. Not giving up.
and 2. Allegedly.
Not giving up. I haven't seen the body.
I'll start off with this first episode. Omega's in what I feel like is a jail cell, even though they say it's not a jail cell. But how are you feeling about Omega in captivity?
No, she's not. She's not in captivity, as they all say. Even though they make her do everything and direct her to do everything for that. But new hairdo, Omega. Got her with a little ponytail going. She was just a wily kid in the first season. She was trying to just be a part of the crew and just kind of trained to be that in the second season, kind of going through a training in the second season. And this one is just a very grounded Omega assessing her situation, knowing it, and then plotting the whole time on how to get out, but also going back to Crosshair because she understands he's hurting throughout the whole thing. So this was such an Omega episode of just caring for the ones that are hurt. With Bratcher, I think that's I know it's not a joke, but
Batcher, but with her Kiwi accent, it sounds like Betcher.
Yeah, betcha. With that and her always caring for it, and of course the droid doesn't care because he is programmed to only do his job. As that Rick and Morty episode, it's like the guy that passes out butter. He's like, "What's my purpose?" Your purpose is to pass out butter. He's like, "Oh." That's kind of what it is with droids. It's like, here, this is what you're programmed to do, and this is all your purpose is. And so she can't reason with him. And so, like, when he's hurt, he's like, "That's not my problem." Then he doesn't add up to what we're trying to do because they're just trying to weaponize these creatures, which I can't. I'm sorry, I'm not. I didn't write down exactly what the species is.
I think they were calling them hounds, so I guess like it's a something hound. The funniest thing in it is that she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna take care of this hound," which the hound is not eating or anything, but she gives part of her food for this hound to eat. But I was like, yeah, fuck every other animal in this place. You're not gonna feed them to.
Right. That was the one thing I'm like, at the end of the day, yes, all the hounds did save their life when you get to episode 3, but she befriends Batcher just because he was being a bitch. Like, long story short.
I think Batcher is a she, but it's because she didn't want to eat her food. Basically,
Right.
it's like, I'm not having this dry food. I would like some wet food, please.
Yeah.
Like, pretty much these animals, the Empire, with zero empathy towards human beings, towards animals, towards anything, because you see right at the beginning of the episode, like, yeah, leave those people. I don't give a shit about them. And that's ends up being their escape plan in episode 3. And then you have now with this hound, pretty much because she domesticates this hound, because she's nice to it,
Right.
they're gonna kill it. Because pretty
Yeah.
much it serves no purpose now to the Empire because they're not gonna be a good enough quote unquote guard dog. So it's one of those that even throughout these now 5 months of being under the Empire's control, she's not losing her humanity, even though everyone else under the Empire's control is pretty much like doing the doggy dog.
Even Camino, I forget her name. I had her name.
Nalase?
Yeah, thank you. And she's now becoming sympathetic just because she realizes what she thought she was making a good business deal, all these things with the Empire, and then once the Empire basically destroys everything that she did, and she basically feels backstab, and now she's a prisoner. So then of course, they kept Omega on Camino, so she always had this attachment to Omega as it was. And now that they realize that she has no power, and she realizes that the Empire only cares about their gain and not who they affect to get there, which is why the Empire is fascinating, and it's fascinating in a way in how it's written, especially Hemlock, who to me is becoming, how they're writing Hemlock is really good. I just and the
Yeah.
I know the actor that plays him. He was in, if you watch Psych, he's the guy with the glasses infatuated with Yang, and he wears ankle weights when he runs. He was in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia as like the crazy family. Anyway, he's been in a bunch of stuff. And at first, I thought it was Sam Whitmer just because of the way Hemlock is done, and just because Sam Whitmer's such a good. And then I finally went back and looked. I was like, oh, it was that guy actor that voiced him. I just like how you knew something was up with Omega, and the reason Omega was always such a mystery. We never saw a female clone at the point of Bad Batch. We never saw a female clone of that bloodline, quote unquote, on that. And then we finally find out that and we knew she was special because she didn't age. She aged like Boba Fett did, but we only thought Boba Fett was the only one that they spliced that way to make sure that they age as a typical human being would, and not rapidly like the clones do. Which is why I think Crosshair is his hands are shaking because he's getting older, and as you know, as people get older,
Plus the trauma.
well, yeah, but I'm thinking it's a little bit of mixture of the two,
Hmm.
because I think they're getting to their point of the DNA where they're running their course.
His hands started trembling ever since that snow thing. So I feel like it's more trauma based than it is of him being older, but that's a possibility. You said bloodline, which reminds me of blood, and there was a lot of blood in episode 1 and 3. Not any like gruesome blood,
There will be
but
blood
there were
samples.
blood samples, a lot of blood samples, and then a lot of like drops of someone else's blood dropping
Hmm.
into the blood samples, which I am theorizing that that's Palpatine's blood. We're starting to see what the Empire is up to on the whole cloning thing, which with the sequel trilogy, we found out, yeah, the cloning thing didn't just stop prequel. They're trying to get a blood sample that will mix with what we're saying is now Palpatine's blood, that is going to keep the midichlorian count at the same or higher. It's not going to be just diminished when you have a transfer, which Nala say even too was like, oh, the Empire should be happy. We had a successful transfer. And they were like, nope, goes the midichlorian count still was diminished. We need a midichlorian count that's going to stay the same or higher. That if they test Omega's blood, which imagine like, yeah, 5 months every day getting your blood drawn every single day, and then throwing that away in
Right.
like basically the wastebasket, because and getting rid of any data on Omega because Nalase is trying to protect her,
Hmm.
knowing that if they find out about Omega's going to be experimented on. Which, side note, too, the experimented on of all these clone troopers. Like, and you don't really see a lot of it, but you see them in their jail cells, and they seem very tortured. So
Hmm.
this was a very dark first episode of
Yeah.
season 3. So thoughts on blood samples, the tortured clone troopers, and Nalase protecting Omega?
You know they made this for 12-year-olds, so it's just nuts to see like blood and torture, but not really. Like you know it.
Science.
Science. It's all for science. And this was just such a dark, gloomy. There's no Omega was the only one that was still had that glass half full spirit the whole episode, where everyone else is feeling defeated or sad. I mean, when she's just very elegant and graceful and just is on top of everything. In this one, she's just so defeated and depressed. And the only thing that keeps her going is protecting Omega. Like that is the only thing that keeps her going. At first, I thought that Emery was going to be kind of compassionate at the end. Nope, she's still stuck with the mission. Now she ended up saving them, quote unquote, but it was for the purpose of the empire and not because she wants to protect them. She wants to protect them to progress the empire.
Yeah, episode 1 and episode 3 are very much like a part 1 and part 2. The reasoning of the split is because narratively, you have to have that second episode in between the two to
Mhm.
understand probably what's going to happen further on in the season. And you're speaking too of Omega being the only one that's cheery. Omega is not that cheery, especially when
Compared to
you
everyone else, she is.
true, but when you have that jump forward from like the 3 weeks to the 5 months, where like when it's 3 weeks, she's looking at Crosshair when he walks by. She's wincing when her blood is drawn, etc., etc. You jump forward. She's not wincing when her blood's drawn. She's not paying attention to anyone when she's walking down. She has this straight face on her. She's like, this is my everyday, the same schedule every single day of what I have to do. But in that time period, yeah, she's really like has become just a stoic person.
You can only adopt one dog, guys, according to Omega. You can't. The other
In
ones,
the
the other ones obey,
eyes.
but the one that they can't tame. It's like freaking Black Beauty over here.
But let's go to episode 2. We got Hunter, we got Wrecker, and we got Wrecker being the voice of reason. Wrecker typically is let's jump into action, we'll fuck shit up, take names, we'll think about the consequences later. But this time he's just like, we can't just jump into things, see what happened last time. And I was like, Wrecker, have you grown? What is going on? Where Hunter is now being the one who is desperate and wanting to do anything as quickly as possible. So, thoughts on Wrecker maturing?
Wrecker maturing. It makes sense because Hunter has always felt responsible for Omega compared to everyone else. Wrecker just
Yeah.
looked at him as his little sister. He'll protect her. Cool, whatever, And then Tech, he's gonna come back, man. Looked at it. They were all a family, but they all Hunter was always the one that was more of like the father. This is I always took responsibility because I'm the one that decided we needed to bring her along, and everyone else was like, okay, fine, because Hunter's the leader, and hits in there. But there were so many tropes that kind of happened in this episode. Number one, you had the gang wars, which they'll probably allude to later on down the road. All the syndicates, you got a callback of the guy getting his horn back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have the callback there. They're willing to do anything they can to get Omega back, which is that it could. There's no telling how dangerous it was to go through the Pike Syndicate, which was literally was the whole like 3 episodes of Boba
Where's
Fett.
that episode? Why are we gonna see that episode? Probably not. We
Probably
should.
not. Probably not. Well, even if they do that episode, then they're going to be like, "Why? I want to get back to Omega and Crosshair." So you just can't please everybody. They got the plans to hunt her, but as soon as that happened, I just remember like, here's where she is. And as soon as they roll up in the planet, I thought of the like this episode should be called "The Princess is Not in This Castle." Like she's in another castle. Like that's exactly immediately what I thought when they rolled up there. And then they get to the planet. The empire is left, and then they meet the other clone kids, like the Lost Boys, basically. So you had the Lost
Yeah.
Boys. I mean, that's pretty
And
much
that's a callback too from, I think, like season one. Those kids were going off,
hmm
and you're like, okay. And they thought, yeah, we're going for more training. No, you're going to be prisoners and get your blood drawn every
yeah.
single day and be tortured. And we're not going to see that because this is a kid's show.
And then you had one kid says, "Don't touch the vines," and of course you're like, Wrecker's going to touch the vine. And then they meet up with the other Mox, Deke, and I forget the other kid's name. And they basically were just like, all we're doing is surviving. They didn't see, that's all they wanted to do. That was their whole, kind of, that's kind of what we're like dealing with, like the first two episodes is like every day is the same. To Omega, it's get your blood drawn, go back, take care of Batcher, and make sure screw the other dogs, but just take care of Batcher.
Have a therapy session with Crosshair.
Here, I have a therapy session with Crosshair, and Crosshair is like, why must you bother me? Just
Yeah,
all that.
and Crosshair too going to her. I know we're talking about episode 2, but Crosshair being like, "Stop caring about the Hound. Stop caring about me. You have a chance to get out of here. Just get out of here.
Right.
I deserve to be here." So he's has some guilt there. But
Oh no,
back
he
to
he
episode
he he
2.
wants he wants to be in. He feels like he unfortunately deserves to be there for basically what he's done so far in these first two seasons. And so he's feeling guilt, he's feeling depression, all the bad stuff that you could think of. He's in the bad place. That's another good show for y'all who want to catch that out. Yeah, going back to the episode, so then it's a suicide mission. So that's just it, huh? We're some kind of suicide squad. So like all the tropes that you could think of, and then we get the alien, the first alien movie mixed with some Lovecraftian beast. Um,
The original Sarlacc
right,
pit.
right. The Dune popcorn bucket, Sky Out to Screen Crush. They kind of alluded to that, but I was thinking it too. Just like all the tropes you can think of was in this episode. It also reminded me of when he talked about an island, and which is the island of misfit toys, number one. And then also shout out to the X-Men, which they're getting ready to do some X-Men 97 stuff, which reminded me of Genosha, where Magneto took all the mutants to this one island because they weren't looked upon the right way, because they weren't good enough, or they were, obviously discriminated against. So he was like, all right, well, we'll just go to this island, which they alluded to with the three boys. They're like, oh, we're going to take you to that, that island.
Yeah,
And
taking a Pabu, which we
right.
saw in season 2.
Right. And we saw in season two, which to me was like, oh, it's no. So it's just like all these other references of my like pop culture brain kept flaring up as I'm watching this episode. It didn't make it bad. It wasn't the first two narratively, which really got me sucked in, glued into. As far as that's concerned, this was a basic episode of Bad Batch,
Yeah.
only to highlight that Wrecker is the clear-minded one, and Hunter is clouded. Oh, that's another trope of you're too close to this mission, man. You're too close to this case. You can't be involved. Because Hunter is so just. I don't care his judgment is clouded because he feels so bad that he couldn't protect and couldn't keep Omega safe.
And he's there like at the comms desk and he's staring at Tech's goggles
Mm-hmm.
and at Omega's doll. So like he's just torturing himself
Right.
basically. One interesting thing is that the planet that they do go to was the lab that they had before their current base lab. They were experimenting not just with human beings, not just with clones, but also with plant life. And we've seen them experiment with animals, but yeah, they're getting with the plants as well. They pretty much went too far that they couldn't handle, so they decided to bomb the friggin' lab because they were like, let's just bomb it and leave. They didn't care who was still there. Imagine how many planets that they were in there because they used that as a base of operation. They were in over their heads because they were experimenting with something, and then they decided to bomb it. Now that's like my thought process, like how many freaking planets are destroyed because of the Empire?
They shoot out that propaganda saying, we're protecting you, but they're actually using you. And then once they're done using you, they're no longer going to protect you and dispose of you because they don't want anyone else to get the upper hand on what they're trying to do. As far as the Vine Lovecraftian monster, to quote another movie, they were too busy figuring out if they could and not figuring out whether or not they should. with that vine monster. So
Yeah.
shout out to Jurassic Park.
And the other thing that was a little tropey there is, so you have the youngest of the three young clones that trust Wrecker and trust Hunter because he sees the doll and was like, oh, they care about kids because
Hmm.
he's basically still the mind of a child. And that the other clone troopers that were based in that lab didn't give a shit about them
Hmm.
there and left them basically. And the older of the young clones is bitter and like is pretty much not trusting of Hunter and Wrecker. But the youngest is. So the youngest goes with them on this suicide mission. The older two just steal the freaking ship and you get that moment of like, oh, they're gonna leave. Oh no, we're not gonna leave. We're gonna go and help and rescue you. And so that trope there too of the
Of Han Solo
being,
coming back.
yeah, but of being jaded and then deciding, oh no, I'm gonna be a good person
Yeah.
instead of protecting my own ass.
Right. It's two things there. It was kind of the Han Solo Chewie from A New Hope, where
Mm-hmm.
he got his money, he did what he was supposed to do, and then Chewie, who is not the leader of the two of them, sat there, growled. I'm not going to do the impression, and he basically was just sitting there, and he was like, I what I'm just doing my mission. What do you want from me? He was just saying like, dude, we got to stay here. We got to help them. They've brought us all this way. We've befriended them, basically all this stuff. And plus, we're no better than the people that they're fighting that we don't like anyway. And that's exactly the conversation that Mox and I don't know if it was Deke or the other kid. I forget which. They're both clones, so they both look alike. They're no better than they were. But kind of going back to the fact that all they know is surviving. So at that time, they're still in that survival mode. Like, oh, this is a way we can survive. We can get off this planet. Who cares? But then they realize that at that point, as he says, we're no better than the people who desert us that we're mad at and want to get revenge on if we desert them too. So I mean that's a typical script 101 for if you watch enough shows and media, then you're gonna get that. But it's still there's a reason people still do it if you do it right.
Episode 3, we're back with Omega. We're back with Crosshair. Um, we're back with Nalase is having to go into that underground cloning facility. I don't know exactly what it. There's a lot of Sith stuff, Sith colors in that area. Hemlock is wanting her to go with him. Like immediately was like, oh, Emery can take over your position, which means that we're going to have Omega's blood actually be tested. Nalase gives the warning of like, hey, you need to escape right now. Use my pad to escape, find a shuttle, get the fuck off this planet before it's too late. We got a little bit of a Emperor Palpatine in
Mhm.
this episode.
He's always plotting. He's always 5 steps ahead. You just when you think you've understood what his game is, you've lost type of thing. And they always exude that even with his eyes and the way he is. And I like the way that, he always travels light because he's always plotting, and so he doesn't want to bring any attention to himself than he has to because he is doing his own thing because he's the emperor. They always still line up. They bring the big welcome committee with all the troopers, which I do always like the Bad Batch on how there's different troopers that they show. The whole like Star Wars thing that I enjoy it, but I always like how overmanned and how overguarded these facilities are. Like when they went in that one hallway and there was like 8 stormtroopers just standing against the wall, like facing themselves. And I'm like, I know it's a Star Wars, and this has always been a Star Wars thing, but is that necessary? Like, I'm glad that people get jobs.
I think it is because they're pretty bad at it. The rebels and resistance keep infiltrating them, even with all of the watch.
I always like it too when you see like how heavily overguarded everything is, but yet you always have someone sneak around. Obi-Wan Kenobi from A New Hope, no one saw his presence except for the only reason he was found out is because Darth Vader just knows him through the Force. And then Omega was just gradually sneaking, gets Crosshair, they sneak, and it wasn't before. And the only reason that they got they got caught is because Emery went into her cell, went, ah, shit. And then she knew exactly where Omega was going to be, and all that. So she connected the dots, and so I always just find that funny about it's such a Star Wars thing. It's like it's super overprotective. It's unnecessary. Like their battle like guarding strategy is just terrible because they put the people in the wrong spots. But I
Can we
understand.
talk about the most funniest part though? Is those two
Yeah,
that were just like complaining, like, we're supposed to be off right now, but they're making us come in early. Like it's
yeah,
pretty. Like I want to see the skit that they had on SNL with Adam Driver,
right.
like working with everyday regular folk.
I think that's they've done that kind of like joke in Mandalorian. The two speeder bike stormtroopers that were like trying to shoot, they like made fun of the fact that they can't shoot worth a crap. I think that was Jason Sudeikis. I forget the other guy that was voicing them. And then they also kind of, I think they also kind of gave a nod to Clerks because Kevin Smith is such a big Star Wars, and there was a whole thing of like Dante and I forget the other Clerks. It's not what we're talking about. But they kind of had the like, aren't you supposed to be off today? It's like, don't remind me, that whole thing. So they always kind of do that type of thing, only to have them knocked out. I knew there was a comic, and Brennan, if you watch this, please comment on that comic. But there was a comic about like two stormtroopers that kind of like unfortunately are part of the empire, but they're always just like dicking around, just always in the wrong spot, the wrong time. But like it's
Yeah,
Star Wars
yeah.
from their perspective. It's a really cool comic, and I forget what it was called, but that kind of reminded me of that too. So, but yeah, I did find that as soon as I saw those guys, I'm like, they're gonna be like, what's going on? I don't know. Why are we here? What are we guarding? Some post?
And it's those are based off of, but off of those two guys from Shakespeare that are just like in
Yeah,
the background.
yeah.
Like that's who they're
I think
supposed
that
to
is a
be.
good call. Once we can actually know who those names are. But yes, that's a
Yeah.
great callback to Shakespeare. It's yeah, everything goes back to Shakespeare, guys. Come on.
Crosshair gets a little bit of his groove back in this
Mm-hmm.
escape because even though he's not too happy that it's no plan, that they're just winging it, he has a purpose now. He has a mission.
Two things that one that made me super like smile so much, and also just like, oh, come on, with it, with two things. Number one is Crosshair is appreciating Omega finally just grabbing and just being like, come on, we're freaking going, because he was still like, no, go away, it's just save yourself, blah blah blah. She goes, no, I can't do this without you. So once they finally get out and they think, oh, and then all the troops and everything or start to maneuver and go, and Omega was just like, I'm sorry, we couldn't do it. And he was just like, and at that point, he's like, all right, I'm here. You got me. Like you said, Crosshair got his groove back, and he was just like, you got us this far. I think we can do it. So he was kind of pushing Omega along when he felt defeated the whole time, and she kept trying to
Yeah.
pull him back in. And then the one that really made me just smile was when he was like, "Do you know formation or Plan 72?" She goes, "Of course I do. Tech made me memorize everything." He goes, "Oh, good old Tech." And I was like, "Ah, that was good stuff."
One part that I really liked created such great tension in the third episode, was such a good narrative device that they use, is that circular thing that went clockwise with the blood, and it kept showing where Omega's blood was. And
Hmm.
when it would strike midnight, that's when her blood is going to be tested. That's when we find out that she is a viable option to keep the M count at the same or higher
Hmm.
for whatever clone, probably Snoke.
I thought it was really good. That was another thing that I had like in my checklist in my head of like that was such a cool narrative device because it was basically counting down the minutes that Omega had to leave before she was found out. For that. So such a cool narrative device, but it wasn't, because if you realize it was going in clockwise, and then the fact that it lit up gold, and there was kind of a dong, like it struck midnight, as you said, that was a good call there. It's like struck midnight. At that point, they already escaped. So it was kind of like that old, they weren't going to shoot him down, and he gave them the call to neutralize them, and then Emery was just like, no, we can't, because she's the key.
Watching the episode, you're like, oh, please let them leave before this strikes midnight. The fact that she is found out is what saves her in the
Right.
end. And it gives you that anxiety, gives you that stress and that
Hmm.
tension while you're watching because you don't want it to happen. But ultimately, because it happens, that's why she's good. Hemlock going, a minor setback. I have the full resources of the Empire at my disposal. We will find her. I have a feeling that Palpatine, and if not Palpatine, Vader might be finding out about this guy not doing his job correctly. And that's going to be some interesting stuff.
He's going to be the same guy that Mickelson played in Rogue One, where he was doing all of his conniving and getting around Tarkin, and then he flew too. They're both Icarus, man. They're gonna fly too. He's gonna fly too close to the sun, and it's gonna get him killed because he's like, I got all the Empire behind me, and I am smarter than everyone, and da 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 da. And you don't push it, or you will burn. There's always a bigger fish, Hemlock. Another thing that I really enjoyed is the way they animated Batcher when he got into the ship and like kind of went down, and his eyes just turned right into a puppy dog. If you didn't notice that, he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, all right. So I was like, all right, shout out to the animators that made him just straight up a dog in this one, because I don't care at this point what happens to
Again,
the.
I think it's a she.
Okay, sorry. At this point I went straight into your typical, like, I don't care who dies, but as long as Batcher lives, then everything's good. Like you said, it's like Independence Day. It's like people are dying all over, but don't that golden retriever better get in that door.
And the fact that not just Batcher, but all of the hounds kind of helped them escape
Hmm.
in a way. So I was just like, maybe just be fucking nice to people and to animals and they'll help you out. I think that's the lesson learned, kids. After these first 3 episodes, do you have any predictions for the rest of the season?
Next episode is either it's going to be another Hunter Wrecker episode, or we might flip back and forth between the two. But now that they're off the planet and they're going to the planet, so they're going to do kind of like a back and forth to figure out where they are. Of course, we don't know really timeline wise if they're on the same trajectory of them both flying opposite ways. We know they're both we know they are, but we don't know at what point were they on the one planet and then when they left. So we really don't know. I don't know if they showed that or not, where they are. I think that's what the next episode's going to be. And then by like episode 6, we might get more of the syndicate situation going on. I think that they're going to probably go back because either the one syndicate is becoming either more sympathetic or something like that. And because they have that connection, I think that syndicate is going to help them at some point throughout this season. So I'm thinking that's going to be a thing. We might get some more rebel popping up because this is the last season. So they're gonna do the hey, remember this guy a lot during this season. They're gonna do some member berries, but as long by like episode 12, Tech's gonna come back, and then we're gonna have Rex, and we're gonna have everybody back, and everyone's gonna be great. Or we're
And
gonna do a
Tech
road
and Wanda Sykes are going to get married.
right, or we're gonna basically it's gonna just be Omega at the end of it because her name is Omega, so she is the end game. If you know the Greek alphabet.
Yeah, I feel like that might be the case. Palpatine being Rey's grandfather, which I still fucking hate that so
Don't
much.
why did you bring? We were so close. We were so close in this episode. You said how to bring it up.
I think if I remember correctly, his son did not have a high midichlorian count. This doesn't work if with Omega's keeping the midichlorian count high as a clone, but I just feel like there's going to be a connection between Omega's blood with Palpatine as a clone. That's how we got Rey. That not only Palpatine is going to be the quote unquote grandfather of Rey, but Omega's going to be in a way maybe like a grandmother of Rey.
At this point, I just no. Just you did what you did. Now you made your bed. Now you gotta sleep in it at this point. This can't be Bad Batch season 3, the retcon. Like you just don't know. We're not doing that. It's over. It's done with. I don't know. I just
They're
bloodline
doing the
stuff.
clone stuff.
Yeah,
They're
I
doing the
understand.
cloning stuff, and Palpatine is looking for a clone that, and he made his son a clone for a reason, and he made Snoke as a clone. So I feel like with all of this cloning stuff, like that has to in some way play a part.
I wonder if we get Gideon at some point, because he basically took exactly what Hemlock was doing and tried to do it
Still
for
called it the
himself.
same thing.
Yeah,
Project Necromancer.
right.
It's the same
So
project.
so I don't know if they're bringing up, Gideon will show up at some point. As a kid, basically realized that what Hemlock is doing, I can also do for myself. Now, obviously, he did it for him, and they're still doing the Palpatine thing as we've known. But when the Mandalorian stuff, so I'm thinking they're still going to tie a little bit in to the Mandalorian and what, because Gideon was using Grogu stuff for himself. He wasn't doing it to, because we were thought the whole Mandalorian, oh, they're doing it to make Palpatine. No, dude wanted it for himself, like the whole time. He was on his own thing, because at that point, the Empire was kind of working in the dark as Sith do, but he wasn't a Sith at that point. The Empire were their own branches. They were kind of their own conglomerate, as we saw, but they were kind of all doing their own thing. Where some people wanted Thrawn, and but Gideon was like, it's a wives' tale. It's a it's an old wives' tale. It's a myth. Who cares? We need to move on. I'm the guy now. But I think that's why I think we'll get some type of Gideon, something with Gideon in this one, just because he took that thing. So yes, I'm cloned out, but I'm not for the Bad Batch.
A lot of clone stuff. Have you seen, just side note, they asked Ian McDermott goes, has Palpatine had sex before? And his answer to that, it's hilarious. If you haven't seen it, go look it up. It's real funny. But any final thoughts or predictions or anything for Bad Batch or
Uh,
Star Wars in general?
like I said, they already did the Gideon. That's my prediction, is Gideon's will show up, so we'll kind of get that tie-in, because they're still needed to, because I've then now that Filoni kind of has full reign, but not really. At least with the overall story, kind of going forward, I think that we'll get some tie-in there to connect some dots and stuff. So a lot of wink, wink, nudge, nudge going on. Yes, there's gonna be filler episode, and I don't understand why they do it. They only have so many episodes, and they still figure out, let's go to this planet and blow this thing up, and then Wrecker's gonna say something like, "Oh, we almost got it," and then we're gonna go to the next episode where we actually carry on the story that we care about. That's just what we is. That's just what it is. So that's why the Bad Batch is like, it's still good, but it's always just like, just why can't we just keep? But you gotta realize it's for a kids show, so I guess kids need that extra just filler episode stuff
I
like
mean,
that.
it was real dark this first
I
episode 1 and 3 for a kids show,
I
but
mean, episode 2 was like scary as crap for some kids, if you think
yeah,
about it. I mean,
that was
those little bitty things, whatever that
friggin'
they,
alien. Like,
yeah. I mean, those like face hugger looking things. No man, and then they get that Lovecraftian thing at the end, like the
yeah,
Sarlacc pit. I'm like, this is gonna freak some kids out. There was
the,
some dark narratives and Freaky Friday crap in the second episode. To me, I liked it. I thought 2 was kind of a filler episode, but it wasn't, because it pushed the narrative on why they put that 2 in there, and it also alluded to the fact that the Empire uses you. Okay,
yeah.
he's not gonna marry you. Don't fall in love with him. It's not gonna happen, sweetheart. Okay. Yes, he's a bad boy, but at the end of the day, all he cares about is what you can do for him now, not what you can do for him later down the road.
I make this prediction every season, and I feel like this season it's actually going to come true, and it's going to make me sad. Crosshair is going to sacrifice himself to save everyone else. I've made that in season 1. Didn't happen. Season 2 didn't happen, but I feel like that's going to be the case here in season 3, and I'm gonna be sad.
I just want Tech back.
I know, I know. I do feel like all of them now are gonna die when you said that with Omega, but if they still if Hunter and Wrecker still survive throughout this, I don't think Crosshair is surviving this season.
Well, Crosshair's always been the most badass of them. So
Yeah.
most of the time, the most badass character, you can't keep him on the team because it makes the team OP. Therefore, he was evil at the beginning and had to go through his stuff by himself. Okay, so they already kind of present him that way. Now there's some nicks in his armor, so to speak. They're very well trained and everything like that, but now his hand shakes, and we don't know exactly. Like I said, the clones might be deteriorating. We don't know
Yeah.
on that, but. No, I mean, I'm still interested to see, especially these first 3 episodes. Obviously, episode 1 and episode 3 were excellent television.
Hopefully the rest of this season is as good as episode 1 and 3 was. But that's our thoughts here on Bad Batch season 3, episode 1 through 3. That's Josh. I'm Soul. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below. Correct us on all the things that we got wrong, because we probably got some shit wrong.
Oh, there's going to be some red ink coming out on this paper.
Anyways, we'll see you next time, and just let us know all your thoughts about Bad Batch. Love you.